So we're at 7 o'clock. I'm going to call to order this meeting on November 18th. Board of Selectmen, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to start with our public service announcements. Let's see, do we have anybody here from the open space?
In the back, way in the back.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
My name's Michael Brenneman. I live at 71 Stonegate Road in Chelmsford. Been there for 30 years. I'm here just to ask a couple of questions of the Board of Selectmen. Maybe get some.
Oh, sorry, this is, not open session. This is from the Chelmsford Open Space.
Okay, then I messed.
Yeah,
I'm
sorry about that.
I'll be back.
All right, we'll be here.
I'm sorry.
Apparently, there's nobody here for
Right.
it.
Nobody here
Pat,
from
you wanna
open
read it?
space.
Okay, the Chelmsford Open Space Stewardship will be hosting, and the Chelmsford Land Conservation Trust will be hosting the day before Thanksgiving walk on November 27th at 2 p.m. at the Thanksgiving Ground Forest. Gather at the Janet Road entrance to Thanksgiving Forest at 2 p.m. and rest warmly. Enjoy a walk through the woods and gather by the rocks for a fire, hot chocolate, and cookies courtesy of Boy Scout Troop 74, and a little history as provided by local historian Becky Warren. This event is free and open to everyone, including dogs on leashes who also get treats. Please join the Chelmsford Open Space Stewardship for this annual tradition. It's a great way to take a break from all the Thanksgiving prep. And for a shorter walk to the rocks, you can enter at Gary Road, and this event is free.
Thank you, Pat. Next up, is there anybody from the Holiday Decorating Committee here? Anybody? Going once?
I'm nobody.
No, you're somebody.
What you're telling me?
Oh, you were definitely somebody.
Something else. Vivian Merrill with the Holiday Decorating Committee. Good evening, everyone. On a totally unrelated note, I just wanted to share something I was at today. I had to do a funeral down in New Bedford for a tow truck driver. And at the cemetery, we're coming up to it, and there's like all this activity, so many lights and cranes and all this other stuff. And basically what it was like 8 different tow companies in the city just got together, lined up a bunch of different trucks, and they had the flag with the yellow stripe on it to honor tow truck drivers. And I just thought that was such a neat ceremony because I'd never seen it before. But now I'm here. Now I'm going to talk about the Holiday Prelude. It's December 1st from 4 to 6. It's an annual event, open to everybody from anywhere. It's free, but we do accept donations. We'll have a lot of the traditional activities like chowder from fish bones and brick houses donating pizza, and there'll be cookies at the toll house and on the common, and hot chocolate and popcorn, and the horse-drawn tractors and the wagon-drawn, the tractor-drawn wagons and the brass bands that are usually interspersed around. We'll have a couple of new dance groups coming in this year. They'll be performing on the Common near the monument. We've got the Give Club over at Chelmsford High School coming out to do the face painting. Artisans Exchange is doing a little drop-in ornament decorating event. You can do a one ornament for $5 or 3 for $10. Anybody's welcome to stop in there. We'll have Piney the Talking Tree over at the barber shop. Tree lights will come on at 5 p.m. The live nativity will start at 5:15. We'll have a DJ in the center doing all kinds of things with the kids and whatnot. We'll have some free giveaways at Santa's house. The Pictures with Santa will once again be hosted by the Chelmsford Dog Association, where somebody will take the pictures and you can download them for free by going to the Chelmsford Dog Association website. And we hope to see everybody there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Chelmsford's Women of Today, Muffins with Santa.
evening.
Good evening.
My name's Sandy Rainey, and I'm representing the Chelmsford Women of Today. This is a great, I'm involved with the Chelmsford Women of Today, which is a local chapter of a national nonprofit organization. We'll be holding our annual event on December 14th, Muffins with Santa, at the Unitarian Church in Chelmsford. We'll have all kinds of breakfast items for the kids, arts and crafts, raffles, photos with Santa. There's a small fee to get in. All the proceeds will go towards sponsoring local children's Christmas wishes and other community needs, such as domestic violence awarenesses. It'll be at the Unitarian Church in Westford, and I hope everybody brings their kids and has a great time.
I think it's on Westford Street in Chelmsford, not.
What did I say, the other way around? It's on Westford Street in Chelmsford, yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, now that brings us to open session. So if you would like to speak to the board, now's your time.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sorry, I should have been back weeks ago, but I wanted to wait till I had lots of paperwork. And hopefully everybody will listen to me. I'm here regarding the flags that
can we
are
get your-
missing in the center of
Can we have your
town.
name?
Oh, my name is Mary Donovan. I live Tanglewood Drive in Chelmsford. I'm here regarding the American flags, the 81 that are missing. And tonight I have with me, as a matter of fact, Mr. Harrington, you're number 10. And Pat, you're number 11. My husband is number 81. 53. I have a list of every single one of the 81 flags that are missing. I also have,
Missing from where?
and nobody can find them in town, I also have the label that was on each flag that was in the center of town. I would like to see them back. None of us were notified when they were taken away. I also have a copy of the award that was given to my husband when he donated the flag in memory of his uncle killed in World War II. I will be glad to give you the list of the names, and I'm hoping with all the money that's in the general fund, you could replace those 81 flags. Mr. Polton, who is a big veteran, was number 58. The Wojcik's family was number 10.
John was 10.
John was
No, you're 11.
John, you got bumped.
Right here, right here, dear.
alphabetical.
I also have the receipts of everybody that paid, but those I'm going to hang on to. My next thing is, I would like to see the Gold Star World War II monument replaced back on the old town hall. I have the list of the 41 men that died, and there are 2 men missing. No big deal. Those 2 men still should be thought of, and their names should be up on it. One came back June 1st from World War II to the Veterans Burial Ground in Somerville. Last week or the week before, one came back from Needham. There are 2 missing in Chelmsford. I don't think their names should be removed, as they should be left out so people can see it, because there are a lot of people that have left town and have come back and they look for these. And it was on the front of the old town hall. I have a picture. They say it was, in the letter, removed in 1955 to have a monument across from the old town hall. I worked for the federal government in 1970 in the old town hall until 1975. Excuse me, that monument was there. I would like to see part of my taxpayer money that has gone into the general fund used to replace those items. How do I go about it? I'm here tonight and hoping that you people will
Warrant article.
come up with a very good answer.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I have
Please.
been working on this with Mary over the last couple of weeks, and one of my suggestions was that the photo that you have there I received from Fred Merriam. I had looked through a lot of town documents trying to find a picture of the World War II memorial at that location after 1955. I looked at some old videos, various pictures of the town hall on historic pages, and I couldn't find one. I'm not saying that it wasn't there after 1955, but the town annual reports are pretty clear what happened in 1954 and 55, that a motion was made to fund a new monument that was placed and still exists to this day on the town common. The difference being that that monument does not have the names etched on there. And there was a note in one of the newspapers that they didn't appropriate enough money. And it appears that nobody ever came forward and added that to that money, those funds, to make that happen. What I did suggest was that we take that list of those 41 names and attach it to the Chelmsford Historical Society's website, where they list every monument in town, past and present. And that way, where we could have a picture of that and list all those names, but make reference to the current monument. With regard to the POW MIA, there is currently a monument dedicated to that at Veterans Memorial Park, and perhaps we could work with them to recognize those two individuals who've been missing and the one that did return. And lastly, I've talked about the flags. As you well know, we stopped putting those flags in close to 20 years ago. Again, I had suggested perhaps we can make a way to acknowledge those families that put them in. I cannot find any evidence of the existence of those flags. The best I can find is they may have been properly disposed at the time due to celebrations committee no longer using them, and at the time, Walter Headland, who's a decorated veteran, was overseeing that. So all I can say to you, Mr. Chairman, is that we are no longer in custody of the flags. We can acknowledge some of these individuals, but I think the appropriate way would be either on the website with the Historical Society through the Veterans Memorial Park, but I'm not sure what, unless I'm provided any further direction, what I can do.
Here is a picture of the flags in the center of town.
Is there room on the monument across the street to put the names? And the money was just never appropriated?
So there was a certain amount of money. I don't have the records with me. I wasn't prepared to give you a formal answer this evening, but there was money allocated to produce the new granite stone, which is on the common. But the article said that there was insufficient funds to put the names on that stone.
Could you fit the names on that stone? I don't think so.
That I don't know, but it was never brought back to town meeting for discussion. So to this day, there are no names on it. And they did change the wording of that stone. It was going to be dedicated to all the veterans, I believe, that were killed in action, but it then was dedicated to veterans of all wars.
So if you want, if one wanted to replace the physical monuments or flags, that's something that would have to be voted on at town meeting, right?
I'm not sure, but the
is it
wording
not
on that monument was broadened from the veterans that passed
Is
World War II. I'm going from recollection, but it now, I believe, reads veterans of all wars, so it was not exclusive to the veterans of World War II.
Just trying to understand, is it discretionary or is it something that needs a vote?
And then when the town put the brick sidewalks in and redid the center, they then displayed the flags, as we do to the current day, off of the decorative poles. And that's done every year from Memorial Day, through the end of July, or in this summer actually went through to Labor Day. So the flags are displayed in the center of town, but they're no longer put on the sidewalk, and I think that had to do with ADA and construction and other issues. They're certainly safer and more secure on the poles than they would be stuck in the ground on the side of the road.
So, what I'm hearing is that we are still honoring these veterans. We are still honoring these veterans through our memorials, through our services.
But these that were served in World War II are not on that monument.
She wants to see the names physically displayed
But the monument is
somewhere.
dedicated to veterans
This
of all
is a Gold
wars.
Star World War II Veterans Memorial. And this is a copy of the labels. And I have a receipt from the company that they were purchased from and put on each one of those 81 flags.
Veterans Park.
Yeah,
So there was metal labels put on them.
Are they on
And none of us that donated those flags were ever notified that they were removed and disposed.
We're talking how many years ago? I don't think anybody in this room knows who may have been or not been notified. All we know is the town meeting took
copies,
the
I can
actions
give
that
it to
Michael
you.
spoke
If you want to
about.
leave copies, we'll definitely take a look
I mean,
at
the other
them.
thing is that physical
Sorry,
flags,
what?
physical flags do wear out. So at some point, they do have to be taken down and properly disposed of in an honorable manner. But what I'm wondering is, are those names on these stones at Veterans Memorial Park, or is that something else?
No, they're not.
Okay.
These are the Gold Star
Yes.
World War II Veterans Memorial. And the flags were different from the memorials.
So why don't you leave what you have with us?
Pardon me?
And can you leave what you have with us? And
I will
then,
leave you the list of the 81 names.
that's fine.
I am keeping their receipts.
Okay.
I am keeping the label, because it's the only one I have. If you want to make a copy, be my guest. I have a notebook of everything on the monument, the flags.
So give us a copy of what you're comfortable giving us a copy of. And then,
And
obviously, we weren't prepared to speak of this
I
tonight.
have a copy of the 41 men that died,
Okay.
plus there are stars for the 2 men that are missing.
All right. So,
Sorry, I believe in the flag and I love the veterans.
all right. So why don't, because obviously we're not prepared to speak about it tonight. So leave with us the list of the names. And
This,
we'll talk, and I guess we'll circle back around at the next meeting.
fortunately, this is my only one of this,
Okay.
of the monument. I will make you a copy of this.
Do you have that?
Yes, I provided that to me.
It's right out, this was out in front of the old town hall. And I know it was there in 1970.
But Mike says he has a copy of that. So if you just want to leave the names, we'll look into it and we'll address it at the next
But I would
meeting.
like to give it to Kat Olters, and she can give it to you because she's a good veteran.
Thank you.
Can you let me know how we can get them replaced?
We'll have Mike take a look at it.
I will work to go get the money to have them put back. But I figured with all the money in the general fund, there's plenty in there that could afford to put those monuments back.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Anybody else want to address the board?
You are number 11, if you want a copy of it, I'll give it.
I'm back. Michael Brenneman, 71 Stonegate Road, Chelmsford, Mass. I'm here on behalf of the 152 Turnpike Development in accordance with the special permits and the conditions that apply to it. We brought copies of some pictures and some, yeah, and you may have seen them before or not or whatever, but with the special, with this. And I'm here, I guess, to just kind of find out, I'm looking to find out what our rights are going forward and who upholds all the rules and regulations of special permits. In there's a list of the special permits that are supposed to be adhered to by the developer. And it's only a month and a half into the project, and so far, as of today, I think they've violated 3 of them. And the first one would be number 1 in the special permit section. I'd say I could give you a copy maybe if you want to put it up there, but as far as D and E, I can read through it if you want, or you can read it yourself. It has to do with the existing tree lines to be preserved along the property lines and the proposed fencing along the sides and rear of the lot, which abut Stonegate, which is what I am, who I am here representing. Basically, I'm one of the Board of Trustees for Stonegate, and my house isn't right next to the it is, I look out my back deck and I'm one property off of seeing everything that's going on there. Along with the D and E are number 1, number 8, the parking on Turnpike Road, especially in front of, we own the property that runs down towards Orchard Woods, and there is an auxiliary fire road that leads into Stonegate property, which they've been blocking and parking in. And also, on number 12, the hours of operation are supposed to be 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, no Saturday or Sunday work until the homes are built and framed and roofed, and then they could work inside the homes on that. Those are the 3 that we have. I mean, I can give you specific details, but like I say, those are, there have been 3 different Saturdays that they've actually worked out there. One being last Saturday, doing street work and excavation on the property. They had a work detail out there, police officer detail, stopped, asked them, they're not supposed to be working. He just kind of, okay, have a good day. I've tried calling the building inspector. I didn't get a response back. I went to the planning board about 2 weeks ago, and I talked to the chairman there, asking him what my rights were, and he didn't give me any real concrete answers. I called the police to say that they're running the equipment on the site, and I was going out within the half an hour. They said, well, we can send somebody over and you can, give them your report. But going forward, how do we correct all this stuff so that it's not happening for the next, I don't know, however long it takes for this project to be complete. There's 6 homes going in there, so I'm looking for direction. I'm green at this. I don't know enough, and it just seems like everybody I've asked, I'm not getting any answers from. So as the Board of Trustees in Stonegate, we're just trying to protect our property lines and
Yeah.
just make everything right, that's all. So if you can lead me in the right direction, that would be great.
So who is for 2 pieces, if they feel there's a zoning issue and the permit's been violated, obviously you can read the emails. Evan felt there wasn't, so they canceled the hearing. So what is their?
If the permits, as noted, are issued by the planning board, if one field is a violation of zoning or the permits, then the enforcing officer is the building commissioner, who's the zoning enforcement officer, Sean Shanahan. If one is aggrieved by the action or inaction of Sean Shanahan, then the appeal method is to the zoning board of appeals. If one is dissatisfied with the outcome of the zoning board of appeals, then the avenue of recourse is the courts, which would be the land court or the district court.
And what about operating outside is that still all the same procedures if they feel they're operating outside the permit,
Yes.
Early in the morning, or they have to go through that same process?
Yes. I mean, if there's an issue of a noise or a thing, then the police can respond to it, much like they would if you were doing construction at 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning. But if it has to do with the zoning and the provisions of the permit, zoning enforcement falls under the building commissioner, who's the zoning enforcement officer. Again, the appellate is to the Board of Appeals, and then the Board of Appeals, the appellate action from the Board of Appeals is to the courts, land court or the Superior Court and law.
Well,
but the Board of Selectmen, nor I nor Michael have any jurisdiction or
No, I
authority on
understand.
this
So,
matter.
but just to be clear, it's just so we're all on the same page. If they felt the mature trees were cut down in error, that went to the planning board. Evan said no, the trees weren't 6 inches, whatever the reason. So their next move there is to the ZBA.
Yeah, or to Sean Shanahan.
Sean. Oh, to
Evan
Sean.
is not the zoning enforcement officer.
Correct.
He's the community development director, the planner.
He was
to
the one that
Board
did
of Appeals.
respond to this.
Right. But again, the legal avenue is to the.
So, and if they feel Sean doesn't respond up to
Right.
their,
And obviously, Sean Shanahan, as building commissioner, zoning enforcement officer, has the resources of town council to assist them in this matter.
so if they don't feel that goes, then their next
Board
recourse
of
is
Appeals.
zoning board of
And then
appeals.
after Board of Appeals, it's the courts.
Now, in the instance where he said they were operating outside the time of the permit, and he did call the police,
Yeah.
what gets done there?
Then the police can issue tell them to stop work, or they can issue them a fine. But, just like we've seen complaints of people picking up trash too early or those other issues, that's work outside of the work hours.
But they had a police detail out there, so,
Again, they can go Chief
I mean-
Spinney, they can go, you know, again, the officer on the site would have to be, you know, Chief Spinney or a, you know, deputy chief or so forth, but.
I just feel like my hands are tied.
I would send an email to Chief Spinney
Yeah.
if you felt like the police detail was unaware of the parameters of the contract. And
I mean,
he's-
I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be that person that
Sean
that is on the phone
Yeah.
every other day talking to him either, because it'll be
Yeah,
like,
they
oh,
can
it's
meet
him
with
again.
Sean.
That would be an easier way, maybe, because Sean is basically.
Yeah, Sean's in every day, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you should call
Sean Shanahan.
Shanahan. You said you've tried to call him?
Is that the
Good.
building inspector? I think, is it Vera or Vila?
Vera's
or-
his administrative assistant.
Okay, well, that's who I talked to that day, and nobody ever got back to me on that.
Give your name and number, and somebody will give it to Sean, and we'll get back to you. He'll get back to you, and you have a meeting and see if you can square it away.
Okay, and that would, so all these,
Be a good start, anyway.
Like we said, it'll go to the zoning board of appeals after that, and then
okay, well, this has already been to court. This has already been to land court. This, not this exact thing, but this is, you know, this is the results of it and the special permits and all that. So,
okay.
that's,
But Sean Shannon would enforce
okay,
this, so
Oh, so-
you gotta get a hold of Sean. and-
okay.
And then
I'll
if he
try
doesn't.
I'll try calling his
Right.
office again tomorrow morning.
And I would say that if you see a detail out there, talking to the police officer that's doing the details, probably not your best at calling the station.
Right, well, that's what I did. I called the station and said, well, the person in the area wouldn't be by for about an hour, but I was leaving and within a half, and you know, to take your report, and it's not taking a report, it's, I mean, I just don't want the work being done. So, I mean, how, you know, it's like, you call and, would I have to actually go out there with the police and show them this special report to have them stop the work right away?
In my experience, when you put it in writing in an email,
Mhm.
you're gonna get
Okay.
faster action with an email to the police department, to Chief Spinney.
Okay, all right, Chief Spinney?
Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak in open session? Seeing no one, we'll move on to item 4, the committee vacancies.
Okay, as of today, we have the following committee vacancies. The Arts and Technology Education Fund Committee has 1 vacancy. The CCA Advisory Committee has 1 vacancy. The Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee has 1 vacancy. The Commission on Disabilities has 1 vacancy. The Community Action Program Committee has 2 vacancies. The Council on Aging has 3 associate member vacancies. Cultural Council can have up to 21 members. There are several vacancies. The Energy Conservation Committee has 1 vacancy. The Historical Commission has 1 vacancy. The Holiday Decorating Committee has 3 vacancies. The Middlesex Canal Commission has 2 vacancies. Neshoba Valley Technical High School still has an alternate member position available that's vacant. The Parade Committee welcomes all applicants. The Permanent Building Committee has 1 vacancy. The Personnel Board has 1 vacancy. The Public Celebrations Committee has 5 vacancies. The Skate Park Committee has 2 vacancies, and the Tree Committee has 1 vacancy. If you're interested in applying for a position on any of these committees, you can fill out an application online or at the town manager's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Next, we have public hearings. Anybody from National Grid?
Good evening, Council. Sam Eng, North Andover Design, National Grid. National Grid would like to install solely owned pole number 2-75 on Quigley Avenue and 120 feet of 2 5-inch conduit coming from the Quigley Ave substation to pole 2-75. Well, actually, that says the pole 3, so.
You have to cut the street open for the conduit, or is the conduit already in, or do you have to cut the street?
No, we have to cut the street open. We won't do that without your permission.
And for anybody watching at home, you pave the street when you're done.
Yes.
This is for additional service, that's,
It's more for reliability. There's some old aerial cable that feeds Princeton Street now. We want to get rid of that and put this in, so If the wind takes it down, it's a lot easier to replace than it would be getting into the right of way underneath the high voltage, 100,000 kV line.
You notified the abutters? Any questions?
Seems pretty straightforward.
Public hearing.
Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak?
Good evening, Maria Carafellis, 26 Quigley. From the documentation that we received, it's really rather confusing as to what they're trying to do. That street, Quigley, has been cut up and recut, and it's a mess. And right now, how are you gonna be able to pave the street where you've dug it up if the plants are closing for paving? That's one question. Where are you gonna put that pole? Exactly, where is that pole gonna go?
We have a marking of where we plan to put the pole.
Where's the marking on the street?
Yeah, it's right in front of this retaining wall here. There's a pole marking there. I don't know if that's your.
So you're gonna put the pole on this side of the street?
Yep.
So you're gonna come across the street?
Yeah, it'll go across the street to the substation over here.
Okay.
But we probably won't do this
There's
until
another
the spring.
drawing.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, because right now you won't be able to pave it.
Right, we won't. We won't
Okay.
be able to cut it either.
Now,
Go.
We're doing the work till the spring.
so is that gonna replace any of the poles coming up the street? No?
Towards Church Street,
Yeah,
we are planning on replacing some of them. I don't know which ones exactly.
okay.
But I can have the designer meet you out there and tell you.
Right, but it's on it's on where the temple is, on that side of the street, that you're gonna be replacing poles, am I correct?
Just so you know, the people at home can't hear this conversation.
sorry.
You need to come to the mic.
To talk to the
Sorry.
board.
So, okay, the concern that I had of them doing it now is now he's telling me he's doing it in the spring. That's okay. But I understand also that there's supposed to be some construction across the street at the temple. They're supposed to be starting that relatively soon. I don't know the exact dates for the temple. Is that going to affect, what I need to know is, how is that going to affect the construction on the temple, and then where that pole's going to be on this side? How would that affect us on our side?
I'm not entirely sure what's happening at the temple.
Okay. They're supposed to be putting in a new temple,
Okay.
and if that construction goes in, how is this going to affect the temple
It shouldn't
and us
really-
on this side?
I don't think it will affect the temple at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, what he's telling me is, this is not gonna be down till the spring? Okay. Can somebody tell me or find out, where is Quigley on the list of roads to be repaved? I know somebody has that, I know that,
We would have to get back to
PW
you.
would have, I can check with.
can you check, Michael, for me, please? And, send me an email, call me, whatever. But I'm just curious because the road is still all chopped up from the sewer system going in.
Yeah.
And now if we're gonna have this on the other side and coming across the road, I just don't, I think our street really needs to be repaved. And it's needed it for a long time, because I've been there for almost 20 years, and it's been all chopped up for 20 years. So I think that we need to consider that too.
Yeah, I will agree that four-way intersection is an absolute mess. But we can get back to you on the list for Quigley.
Okay, alrighty, thank you guys.
Paul, is there some higher level of coordination for projects like this where you have major reconstruction to something like a temple, and then you've got sewer and electric and repaving? Is there a project manager looking at this whole thing and scheduling things so that they are in harmony?
No, I mean, this request just came in from National Grid. I don't know how far in advance they schedule their work, or if there's something that triggered this to take place. So it's not as though we don't have any long-term lists from National Grid or Verizon or whatever about their upcoming work. What we do is when we're scheduled to resurface a road, reconstruct a road, we reach out to the utilities ahead of time and say, look, we're scheduling this work, for example, next summer on Quigley Avenue. Therefore, because the town has a moratorium on excavating the roadway after the paving is done, therefore get your work done in advance of that. So
Right.
we're the ones proactive on that. No, we don't have any, and it's impossible for us to know all the construction schedules of
I'm just thinking in terms of pulling permits.
right.
It's already been inspected though by the town engineer.
Yeah.
He's already been out and looked at
DPW's
it.
been out there, but we, like I said, we notify. We don't know, and we had a concern that was raised a few weeks ago about a similar road was repaved, new owner buys the property and wants to make a gas line connection.
And it was a no cut.
It was a no cut, yeah. I mean, so no, but I don't know any better way that we can coordinate this work. And again, most of these issues arise not because it's on a scheduled list of routine cutting, like tree trimming of National Grid, which they're gearing up to do. These are issues that arise due to circumstances, so we don't.
Right.
they
But I would
don't have
also
an
think that
advance
when the temple or whoever pulls their permit
Mm-hmm.
and starts going through the process, National Grid will say to them, well, we're doing this or we're doing that,
notice.
heads
Or
up.
and if you need an upgrade of utilities, we need to install another pole or a
Right.
conduit and so forth. So oftentimes they're related to a construction project.
That's what I was wondering.
Right.
Sir, what is driving this?
I actually didn't speak to the engineer about this, but so I can't give you that answer. I don't want to give you any, I don't want to make an assumption.
That's not a bad answer.
Thank you.
So, pass.
Is there anybody else that would like to address the board on this? Seeing no, motion?
Do we want to continue it so we can get answers to some of these questions?
It's up to you.
What will we know other than
I
a
don't
road
know.
schedule for Quigley Avenue in 2 weeks or for 4 weeks?
I don't think we will.
Just to make it, they have to do it in the springtime rather than now.
I mean, they
Because
already are
right,
going to
'cause
do it in the
usually
springtime.
November 15th is the cutoff, and we're already past that.
Other
So,
than that, it's all been inspected and everything.
Okay, well, also, I note that there are two
Two.
petitions here, and it seems like we've been talking about both of them together.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, one is the underground and the other one's the poles, right?
Yes.
So we okay to have one motion?
Is there anybody
for
from
both?
the public that would like to talk about the poles?
She just did.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
So, and we really did discuss both of them.
Okay, I'll make a motion then to close the public hearing for both poll petitions.
a second.
We have a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll make a motion to approve the poll petition and conduit petition for plan number 287-97277, on the condition that it will not be done until the spring of 2020.
Second.
Motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item 6 on our agenda, which is licenses, change of manager for the all alcoholic beverage restaurant, Bertucci's Restaurant. Is there anybody here from Bertucci's?
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. So this is a,
What is your
Yeah,
name?
and
Oh.
you
Mary
need for the
McGraw.
record.
okay, thank you, sorry. And we're just, on the license, it's just change of manager?
Yes.
And will you be the new?
Yes.
You had experience as a manager before?
Yes, I've been with the company for 12 years, actually. This is my second time in Chelmsford at the location here. I was previously in North Andover and Andover as a general manager,
Thank you.
and I have held a liquor license in all of those locations.
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion that we approve the change of manager at Bertucci's Restaurant.
Second.
To Mary-
Hold
to Mary McGraw.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There you go. Thanks, have a good night.
Good luck.
And then we have a roadside vendor, Ken Matthews.
Hey, Ken Matthews.
Okay. So you're looking for a license to sell Christmas trees?
Yes.
And you were here last year, right?
Yes.
And this isn't for a charity or anything like this, just for your own business?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve a roadside vendor license to Chris Matthews to sell Christmas trees at 211 Chelmsford Street from November 29th, 2019 to December 26th.
Ken
2000.
Matthews.
What did I say?
Chris.
Oh, Ken Matthews.
Second.
A motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
All right, next we have a status hearing regarding the temporary structure for a Class 2 auto dealer for Capital Motor Group.
Good evening. My name is Rodrigo Silva. I'm from Capital Motor Group. I'm here regarding the temporary structure of Class 2 for auto dealer.
All right, so I guess we had some discussion on, we gave you a one-year license to operate in a temporary structure?
Yes, on a temporary permit for the trailer.
Okay, and then I think as you're approaching that, you were supposed to be building a permanent structure?
Yes, we're gonna put a building over there. So what happened, like I have to extend the permit for my trailer for probably another 6 months. And they told me to come on the board again.
We're not ready to do a permanent one, they want to continue with the temporary, got it? Have a hard time.
Well, there is, yeah, there is a 1 year on the trailer.
Okay.
That's the problem we run into. And the 1 year is up
Quickly.
now,
Yep.
right? The 19th, I think?
11/27.
The 27th, so at the 1 year. So our options are what? Can we extend it for 6 months, or is that at,
It's a zoning provision.
I know.
We're not, again, as we saw earlier, we're
Zoning
not the
board.
zoning board.
So we can't renew his license, he's gotta go to the zoning board and get an approval
Right.
for a 6-month
And
extension.
that was why we asked them to come in now, because you'll be issuing new licenses next month.
Okay.
We're not
When,
looking-
and it's zoning board of appeals he has to go to?
Yes.
So when is their next, is he gonna be able to get that done before the 27th?
I don't know. Well, even if he gets it done, how's he gonna get it built?
No, but if he gets,
It's a
a
hearing.
6 months
It's a
extension,
hearing deal, yeah.
No, you're saying, he's asking about the
See, if
6-month
you can-
extension. He has to go to the zoning board for that.
I don't know if he can get into the agenda, because you have to have notification of abutters and so forth, but I don't, because usually they meet the first Thursday of the month,
Is he looking to increase the capacity as well?
not to my knowledge.
No, now we're gonna do next year. We have for 35 cars right now. We have like around 30 cars on a lot right now, 32 cars. So that's the time we take to put all the budget together, because the lady wanted the land, she gonna put the building. So I have all the code for her for dig, excavation, building. She need to redo the whole pavement. That's a long project. That's not something we can do in a short time. And now as
I
the winter
understand.
come, you're not gonna be able to dig. So you're gonna be able to dig like probably. You can start digging right now, put the foundation, and start do the build. But the problem is for the pavement, you have to do the whole pavement over there. You make it look like brand new everything. So you're gonna be able to do just next year.
so can we give him, I mean, we're gonna have to collect the fee for his license, but can we give him a 2-month extension to go to zoning board of appeals and get a 6-month extension to the trailer? Is that logical?
His license is gonna expire at the end of December.
So we'd have to renew his license.
Right. But how do
And
you
he-
renew his license when he doesn't have a suitable?
Well, that's what I'm saying, but and then with the contingency that in the next 2 months, he gets approval from zoning board of appeals to get a 6-month extension on the trailer.
Right, because we don't exercise the issue of.
Correct.
Of zoning, so then he would have to get, if it's obtainable.
Right, but if he doesn't have it in 2 months, because my fear is, the building is not in his control, and my fear is that his landlord's saying yes, 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 and just dragging him along, and nothing gets done.
And we don't want
He's
to
right,
collect.
you can't do it in the winter, so.
I don't want to collect the permit from him for a license that can't be issued.
Mhm.
So that was why we had him come in this evening. was to bring this to an early start as opposed to waiting till the normal renewals next month.
Because what happened, like I have a contract delayed, I put a lot of money, I put over $30,000 on the build over there. I put signs, put the trailer, I did the pavement over there and everything. That's not depend on me, To depend on me, I do everything, but that's depend on the owner of the property. And she agreement to put the build. That's all to have an agreement with her before. She's supposed to put before 1 year period, they build it for me. She never did it.
Well, that's not our issue.
Yeah, I understand, but that's the situation I am.
Yeah.
We're
But the problem is,
I'm in the middle of the bridge.
Yeah,
Right.
we're sympathetic.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
we can't issue a license to you if you don't have a building to operate out of.
Yeah.
So you need to get approval for an
For the
extension on your
temporary
building.
trailer. For the temporary trailer.
Right.
And
So you need to go to the zoning board of appeal and get some sort of an extension on your temporary trailer.
That's what
With
it-
that, then we can give you a license.
Yes, so
So you should get a hold of Sean Shanahan tomorrow morning, who's the zoning enforcement officer, and then Sean can refer him to the Board of Appeals. They can get a hearing as soon as they
Yeah,
can.
so you'll also have to call Sean Shanahan, our building inspector, to work this through with him to get,
I already spoke to him last week, and he told me send an email to I don't know, the other man in charge on that. And when I spoke to Christian, she told me I have to come over here before I renew my license because all the paperwork supposed to send on Friday on the 15th, and today's 18. And I don't have the license extend. I have the permit to January for my build over there for my permit, and I can be able to sell cars and buy cars in the auction either.
So I think we're the hang up. So if we can grant him a 2-month extension.
But we're not issuing anything this evening.
No, but can we
we'll
grant
either consider it you'll either consider it on your December 2nd meeting or your December 16th
we renew
meeting.
the licenses in December.
And then you can see where he is at that point in terms of whether to issue the license. That's the point of
Yeah,
coming
we're
here.
just- Paul's just getting on the
Recommendation
radar.
Sean may have at the same time, right?
Right, or the Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yep.
So there were 2 criteria identified. One was the zoning related to the temporary structure, which I think is what you're talking about with Sean and the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the second was that whatever structure is being used is suitable to run the business. So who makes that determination that the trailer for 6 months is suitable? Is that still Sean? That we don't make that determination? Okay.
So your license isn't going to get renewed until December 2nd. So between now and our next meeting, you need to get a hold of Sean, and we're going to need something from him saying that this is okay.
Okay, I come tomorrow, talk to Sean then.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, that brings us to reports and presentations. Richard Sullivan.
Good evening. I hope I don't lose my voice. I somehow picked up a cold over the weekend, and I'm struggling a little bit. But what I wanted to do is basically give you an idea of how this year's audit went, tell you how we do it, some of the things that we look at, and provide you with some insights as to not only how the finances are of the town, but also the people who are responsible for managing them. From an audit perspective, this job has pretty much gone the same way for the last several years. We usually come in May. Last year we came in on May 21st. This year we came in on May 20th. And we do what's called our prelim work. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then in early September 9th of this year, we come in and do what's called the phase 3 work, or the final work. And that's the work that we go through where we go down the balance sheet, we look at all the things that are important. We do all our what we call substantive testing, which is testing of items specific to June 30th. Now, the prelim, there's a lot of things that go on that we try to get done that aren't specific to June 30th. For instance, like cash has to be reconciled as of June 30th. Receivables have to be reconciled. But there's a lot of stuff like the budget, long-term debt. We also do test of transactions for the 4 major revenues, 4 major transactional cycles you have of revenue, expenditures, payroll, and journal entries. We try to get as much of the single audit as we can get done, which usually is pretty much all of it except for the final numbers. Just so you know, the single audits, if you receive more than $750,000 a year, you have to have a single audit of major grants attested, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then, like I said, when we come in at year end, We walk down the balance sheet, cash being the most important thing for us to pay attention to because it's the most liquid. But we also look at all the major revenue accounts, major expenditure accounts. We do what we call a flux analysis to see if there's any aberrations that might require additional work to be done. And after all that's done, we pretty much wrap it up and hopefully have a good turnaround of getting the report to Darlene and John so they can look at it and we finalize it. Just a little bit about working with your team here. We come in September, which means the books close pretty quickly. In fact, I'm pretty sure we could get in earlier, but our schedule is difficult too, so we're always trying to manage that. But Darlene gets the books closed pretty timely, and we're very happy. We usually get the information about a week or two before that because we have to load it all up into our software. As far as John and Darlene and their team, they were ready for us. We come in and, we like to have what we call a sense of urgency. We like to come in and try to hit it hard, try to get done as fast as possible, both for your purposes and our purposes. We've designed our systems to get that done, and what we ask for from our clients is to be ready for us when we come in so that all the information and the checklist that we provided you prior to our arrival, it's in fact waiting for us. And that's usually the case, or has been the case here for several years, which makes our job go a lot smoother, as Laura can attest to, because she's been on this job for probably 5 years now, rising up to where she is a supervisor right now. But she's been on this job for all those years, and each year I think it gets a little better. So I just wanted to share that with you, that piece with you. Now, of the major, what I call balance sheet elements, I said cash is the biggest one. You had $65.1 million in cash at the end of the year, and investments, I should say. And we audit the heck out of them, to be quite honest. Receivables, not so much, but you still had $10.3 million. And you had about $225,000 of capital assets that also had to be looked at. The three biggest things on your balance sheet is the OPEB liability, the pension liability, and the debt that you have, both excluded and under the cap. OPEB liability was $60.1 million at the end of this year. That's a small increase, about $855,000. Now, the thing that I like that I see here is that you also have an OPEB trust, of which is $10.4 million in, which is an increase of $1.6 million from the prior year. You contributed about $1 million into the trust and had about $500,000 worth of investment income. Right now, the plan assets of what they call fiduciary funds are 17.4% of your total OPEB liability, which tells me that you're working hard to get a grasp on this difficult liability, and I think you're a little bit ahead of the curve of some of your peers. On the pension liability side, you don't have much control over this. This is the Middlesex County retirement system. Your increase in your net, we call NPL, net pension liability, was up $6.9 million from last year, and that's primarily because the Middlesex County went up. Right now, its total NPL is $1.6 billion. I think, I don't know if you remember how bad it was, the stock market was back last December of 2018, when I think we lost about 15% of the market. All of that market came back in January, but because the retirement systems are as of December of 18, the funded ratio went down from 49% in FY17 to 46% in FY18. I think that's going to correct itself. I'm pretty sure it did in January of 2019. And finally, there's debt. Now, debt is continuing to go down just because you have your principal payments. You had about $84 million worth of debt at the end of the year. Debt service, total debt service, as a percent of the budget is about 11%, which some people would say might be a little high. I don't know if it is, but I can tell you this. If you take out the excluded debt, your debt service is about 7.4% of your total budget, which is very reasonable. You don't want to see it go below 5, and anytime it gets a little higher, again, these debt exclusions where the taxpayers vote to do something special with the debt, that makes a lot of sense to be at the 11% level. One other thing on debt, which I think is worth noting, we actually put it in the MD&A. There was a refunding. It's called like a refinancing of your home mortgage, and that was about a $2 million issue, but it reduced your future debt service by $248,000. Which is something to pay attention to. I know John looks at that a lot, along with the FAs, and if they have an opportunity. As a matter of fact, I think there have been quite a few refundings over the past few years related to this, which is also, I think, is important. sometimes, if I was in your shoes, what's the difference between this year's report and last year's report? Not a whole lot. I don't know if we went through the strew of GASBs that had to be implemented over the last 4 or 5 years. We had GASB 68 in 15, 74 in 17, 75 in 18, which are all related to pension and OPEB liabilities. Those have all been taken care of, so there's really nothing to say that's different from 18 to 19. The only difference is for us, it's a lot more extra work, and it added about 10 more pages to the report. Little on the financial highlights. I don't like to go into the special revenue funds or such, but I'll talk about the general fund and some of the enterprise funds. On a budget basis, which is really how you run the town, you don't really pay attention to all the stuff that we have to do to make these GAAP compliant. You had a $1.7 million profit compared to a $554,000 loss in the prior year. Revenues came in slightly higher, about $750,000, and turnbacks were about $1.7 million, which resulted in the profitability of this year. A big factor when you're looking at, particularly S&P, when they're looking at your balance sheet, they want to look at what they call unassigned fund balance. And essentially, unassigned fund balance is, we used to call it unreserved fund balance, but it's got some other things in it. It's basically the part of your balance sheet that you can use for whatever you choose to use it for. It factors in a little bit to free cash, although it's not a one-to-one relationship, but it's basically reserves that you can allocate at your discretion. Unassigned fund balance was $17.6 million at the end of the year, and equals 12.18% of your expenditures, which is extremely healthy. That means you have adequate reserves equal to 12.18% of your total budget. I think that the fact that you have a AA plus rating by Standard & Poor's is the reason why, or that your AA plus rating is because you have such good reserves and you've always been able to maintain them as well as replenish them when you had to use them. So that's what we call the governmental funds. On the other side, we have the enterprise funds, of which I believe you have 4. And all the enterprises essentially broke even. A little bit of a loss, a little bit of a positive, except for stormwater, which had a significant increase. But that's due to a $1.5 million transfer in from the general fund that basically made them have about a $1.5 million profit. On the capital assets level, things that were purchased, you spent about $6.3 million in FY19 on new capitalizable assets. You spend a lot on other assets like Chromebooks and so forth, but they don't get capitalized in the financial statements. $2.2 million for the school, $1.1 million for the ice forum. DPW had infrastructure improvements, sidewalks, roads, drainage, and additional equipment of about $1.1 million. And then the remainder of it was things in the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 range, such as vehicles for the DPW and police and other departments, as well as some technology improvements at the school. So I guess what I want to leave you with, if you're looking at the overall audit results, we own 2 pages of that report. It's called the Independent Auditor's Report, and that report is an unmodified opinion. It's a clean opinion in layman's terms. If you read it, it's a lot of negative. We give negative assurance to everything. That's how we do business. But it's unqualified opinion. You can't get better than that. The information that we got throughout the audit, subsequent to the audit, before the audit even started, not only was received timely, but was also accurate. There were no recommended adjustments to the books, meaning we didn't go to Darlene and say, Darlene, you have to book this entry because it's wrong. I think that's important to this group because it means that the information you're getting on a contemporaneous basis throughout the year is in fact accurate. And going back to that transaction testing that I was talking about, one of the things we do look at is journal entries, because journal entries are things that they can be standard, but if there's a lot of journal entries required, that means that something's not being posted in the right spot at the right time. So we didn't find any instances in which journal entries were abused or were needed to correct an entry that should have gone from one account to another, which tells me that the information you receive throughout the year is in fact accurate. And again, I already mentioned we had great coordination with the finance people here in terms of getting this report done and getting it done on a reasonable pace. I'm going to briefly talk about the federal awards report right now, which will only take about a minute. Then I'm going to pass it on to Laura so she can finish up with the management letter. Your expenditures for federal awards was significantly higher than in previous years. you had a mitigation grant, which was associated with the Williamsburg Riverfront project, and that was about $1.2 million. That didn't appear in any of your previous reports. So your total expenditures this year were $3.4 million. We did test that grant because it's considered to be a major grant. It was sizable enough to be considered a major grant, and it was about $899,000, give or take. There's 3 opinions in that report. It talks about compliance with laws and regulations. It talks about the administration of major grants, and there's also an opinion on the actual schedule of federal awards itself. We had no findings, no question cost, and all 3 opinions were clean opinions too. So you folks have done a good job, obviously, in my opinion, in handling your federal award programs, and it just manifested itself once again this year. And I'm going to let Laura take over for the management letter, and we'll stick around if any questions after that.
Yep. Laura Stone, Powers and Sullivan. So the management letter basically is just a list of our recommendations. It's a very, very light management letter. There was only 1 new comment this year, and then there were 3 comments last year that we'll provide continuing recommendations for. The 1 new comment this year, mainly just an informational comment about cybersecurity. It's been many attacks and instances where municipalities are being hit with ransomware, and there's a payroll scheme out there that a lot of municipalities are falling victim to. We spoke with IT. They're aware of the risk exposure. They've taken a proactive approach to mitigate any risk exposure to those attacks, firewalls, backups, etc. But we do recommend that the town formally document the risk assessment of the risk exposure to a cyber attack. This could be an internal review, or it could be an independent firm that comes in and does a formal risk assessment. And then we'll recommend that the town implement procedures that are implemented to mitigate any of those risks that arise. We also recommend that the town look into cyber liability insurance so that any costs associated with an attack can be mitigated. There were 3 comments from last year. Basically, those recommendations continue. The first one is to review a reconciliation of insurance bills. We think it's important that the town have timely reconciliation procedures of their insurance bills to the withholdings. So we'll recommend that the town enhance timeliness and documentation of those insurance bill reconciliations. The next comment relates to personnel files. So Rich talked about the OPEB liability, and the actuary takes the census data file that the town provides, and that information is done every 2 years. And to test the OPEB liability, we go in and we test the census data that the actuary has. And to do that, we look at supporting documentation in the personnel files. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, insurance enrollment forms. We weren't able to test everything, so we recommend that the town implement procedures to enhance those personnel files to ensure that everything is in there that's needed to support that database. And the last comment is the maintenance of a health insurance database. Same idea with OPEB. Every 2 years, the town is required to submit a database file or a census data file to the actuary so they can compile that information and they use it in their actuarial valuation. When we tested that last year, because you guys are in an interim year this year, so last year that information was mainly used by the Maya's information was used to create that database, which is not the best course of action. We want to make sure that the town has that information readily available for them. No action was taken in 19 to develop this database, so when the actuary is requesting this information going forward into this next year, that information should be available to them. So we'll recommend that the town develop a database to house all that information. But overall, it's a light management letter, a couple pages long, so overall very good.
On the first 2 repeats from last year.
I'm sorry. Sound like we're coming from over
Oh, it
there.
did, yeah.
Sorry, on the first 2 repeats from last year, the reconciliation of the insurance bills and the OPEB liabilities, had we worked on those during 19? Was there progress, or was it like the 3rd one where we
Yeah, so there was progress. There was a reconciliation performed for the active members, and as of September 2019, when we came out for our year-end testing, the last reconciliation was performed in April. So we just recommended that a more timeliness reconciliation procedure and that it's adequately documented. And that was only performed on the active members, so we'll recommend that retirees also get reconciled on that too.
Thank you.
Is there a best practices way? Is there a method to reviewing this sort of data? Would it be based on like a month-to-month basis, whoever had a birthday that month? Like what is the best way to keep a rolling, up-to-date file?
Well, quite honestly, we don't have a lot of clients who rely on somebody outside the organization to provide information to the actuary. All that information is usually designed in-house. And she mentioned the personal files, not including marriage certificates and date of births and things like that. We're not used to seeing that. We're used to seeing that everything is in there because it's required to be there in order for the actuary to do the work they need to do. Even when actuaries weren't that important, information should be there. So quite honestly, most of the time we see an Excel sheet from the client. There are some systems out there, but I think they're cost prohibitive. But if you have an Excel sheet that can basically track every employee, and that's usually how it's done. Sometimes the town and the school may run parallel because it's just too comprehensive, but there's usually a separate database maintained by the town and individual by the school that they know exactly what's going on. And so I don't have a perfect world for you, but I can tell you that it's just basically managing the information. And you're right, if somebody gets married, that's a change in status. If somebody becomes single, that's a change in status.
Has a baby.
But all those things have to be done.
Yep. You'd get a birth certificate for the baby, things like that.
Right. So, Paul, is there a way we can?
Yeah, what had happened was
request that?
when we last did it comprehensively, we did it with Maya outside because at the time there was a concern of the town holding on to vital records.
Okay.
Now the new philosophy is we want the town to hold on to vital records. Because the whole issue, anyway, so we're now working on that. Also, I can assure the board that we do have cyber liability insurance that's issued through Maya. And so that is in place. And also last week, Ted and I sought an independent cyber risk assessment that's available to the community. We should hear within the next week if that will be available to us. So we are on that as well.
Okay, fantastic.
And my understanding too is when this was discussed last year, going back to all the retirees and asking for birth certificates and marriage certificates and everything, first you're gonna get a lot of people going, why do you want it?
Yeah.
So moving forward, if I understand correctly, we're collecting all that data now on a move forward
Exactly.
basis.
It's held up in personnel, in the personnel office.
Darlene, could you come to the mic?
Yes, Jean Paziali, the HR director, is gathering all that information. We feel that's probably where this should all start. When she does a new hire, she should be collecting all that information. So we're doing that now for new hires. She is having a lot of issues trying to get the retiree and all of that information for retirees. But we're looking at different systems. Does she want to use Munis, or does she want to use another system? However she wants to keep that information, I have no problem as long as that we're able to, when the auditors come in, that all that information is accessed in a file, or if she just scans all of that information in. She can. There's a lot of different ways of doing it, looking at it and talking with other towns and how they're handling some of their personnel files. But we're probably going to have a harder time with getting birth certificates and things like that for retirees. But going forward with retirees, we can do that. It's just all the past ones. So the auditors have been really very understanding that they understand that we did get all that information at the beginning. But going forward, anybody newly retired or that all the new employees, we are gathering all that information.
Do you have an approximate number of how many, or like a percentage of people we still need to get?
Oh, retirees. We have
is
more
that a
retirees than we have active employees.
I mean, there's over 800.
And we're
retirees.
talking, and you're talking school and town.
Right. That's a lot.
Thousands.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's good to have an idea of the scope.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. There's a lot.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? We can answer them.
Anybody have any other questions?
I just want
to thank them, their team. I think everybody, I know the board knows, and I just wanted I had a limited staff. I had a new staff that started during the audit. I had 2 new employees. I only have 4 employees, so half of my staff were brand new. And I have one, and the 4th one is a part-time person. So Laura was very understanding. I was, trying to train my staff and trying to, get them to understand what the auditors need and how to find when they need to pull invoices and things like that. Purchase orders and all that stuff. They, my staff didn't really know where to go. They were just like looking at me. So they were really understanding during this audit this year, because it was a little bit, just a little kind of crazy in the office doing year end, and it was just kind of me trying to train and get their information. So I want to say thank you to them for being so patient. They've always been so good. So we're glad that everything checked out and it was a good audit. So I thank all your help and understanding during the time the summer, because it was really kind of crazy between trying to close the books and train new employees. But everything is great. The employees are working out really well, and everybody's doing great. The office is doing really good. So we're happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so.
Thank you
We're
very
good.
much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we move to Section 8, which is the tax classification hearing. Are we going to start with the assessor's presentation?
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, Sam Chase, Board of Assessors, speaking for the board at this hearing. Our board is appointed by the town manager and consists of 3 members, currently Sam Chase, Jack Duffett, and Kevin Sullivan. Although all board members must qualify as assessors by taking Massachusetts Department of Revenue courses and passing a state examination, we do not, as a board, manage the day-to-day assessing operations. That's done by our chief assessor, Frank Green, and his staff. In Massachusetts, city councils or town boards of selectmen set the annual property tax rate. You do that every year after conducting a public hearing where you review the effects of available exemption and tax rate options on the different property classes. To help you make your decision, you have the benefit of our presentation and other supporting materials as required by your tax review policy. We try to design our presentation to make it easy for you to see how various rate and exemption options can impact property taxpayers. We hope that you'll find this package informative. Before getting into the presentation, we'd like to review how we arrive at an assessed value for property. There are 3 methods used to determine real estate assessed value. They are the sales, the cost, and the income capitalization methods. The law requires that assessors use at least 2 of these methods in combination to determine value for a residential or commercial property. Now, many people do think that property values can and should be determined by looking only at property sales. That assumption is not supported either by accepted appraisal standards or state law and is therefore wrong. For residential properties, assessors use the cost and sales comparison methods together to arrive at a value, as the law requires them to do. For commercial properties, all 3 methods together are typically used. The valuation process is not arbitrary or subjective. For residential properties, assessors collect real estate sales data to determine the market. That's the sales method. They use individual property data that includes building size, age, construction quality, physical condition, and use restrictions to determine structure value. That's the cost method. They take property characteristic and sales data together. They apply relevant building cost and depreciation schedules, and then use standardized methods confirmed by statistical testing to arrive at a market value for a specific property type. Then, the Department of Revenue reviews all of the assessor's work and must certify that all real estate values meet the legal standard of being at full and fair cash value before the tax rate can be finalized. That's how it's done. Now, on behalf of our board, I want to express our gratitude to Frank and his capable staff for the outstanding work that they do to ensure that residents are treated fairly and courteously. Residents who have questions concerning property valuations should feel comfortable in contacting the assessor's office at 978-250-5220, or you can access them through the town webpage. Go to the assessor's website. Frank and his staff are always available to assist you. Thank you, and I will now turn the balance of the presentation over to our Chief Assessor, Frank Green, and we're both here after the presentation to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, board members. Here we are again. There's a public hearing held every year as required by law. The purpose is to provide a forum for the public discussion of local property tax policy. After the public discussion, the board will decide whether to tax all classes of property the same or on different rates. Some of the areas of review. Evaluation requirements, abatements and compliance I'll have in this report, split rate, minimum residential factor, the historical review of tax rates and values, and effect of various rates of shift on the tax rate for each property class. I'll touch on some of these options you'll be voting on, and then a little more in depth later on in the presentation. The small commercial exemption, which we already enacted for the first time last year, all the qualifying properties must be valued at less than $1 million. Eligible businesses are what make the building eligible for the exemption, although the savings realized are passed on to the property owner. A business eligible is only if 10 or fewer full-time employees. The tax shift is actually within the commercial industrial class itself. The residential is unaffected by this shift. The residential exemption works in a very similar manner within the residential. It's a shift within the residential class. An exemption may be granted up to 35% of the average assessed value of all residential properties. That would include large apartment buildings, all residential parcels. The shift burden is for apartments, seasonal, and high-valued homes are generally excluded. The open space discount is up to 25% of the value of the land that is classified as open space, which is determined by the Board of Assessors. Open space is land that is not otherwise classified and is maintained in a natural state. Right now, I believe Bedford is the only community in the Commonwealth that has this particular exemption. This is a list of the abatements that were filed over the last 3 years. Typically, I just give the past year, but we gave the last 3 years. As you can see, 19, we had residential filed 54 with 28 abated. Commercial industrial, 73 count with 18 abated. You'll see at fiscal 17, particularly a high number for the filings. That was a year in which we had a town-wide measuring list, which actually hit the assessments for the first time during that year. The income and expense requirements, or the compliance for that, was up to 60%, which is the highest I think it's been since I've been the assessor. The income and expense, for those that don't know, is a form that we're mandated to send out. It's requesting the income from income-producing properties, commercial properties, in large apartment buildings greater than four units or larger. And it requests information on the rent as well as expenses associated with the real estate. For commercial properties, not including the businesses, we're not interested in income as it derived from the business, but rather just the real estate itself.
So we're required to send them out, but they're not required to return them?
They are required to return them. When they don't, they get a fine of $250. They also put in peril their right to appeal. So if somebody applies for an abatement, has not filed that in the past for that fiscal year, I then send out another one. If they don't file then we deny them. And then if they apply at the appellate tax board, typically what happens, the appellate tax board gives them another opportunity for warning them that if they don't comply, the case will be dismissed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The minimum residential factor is actually established by the Department of Revenue and basically mandates or describes how much we can, or any community, can possibly shift the tax rate. Chelmsford for fiscal 20 is 89.49, which basically is where the town could not shift any more than 150, which is the same as the maximum was last year. This next sheet here is, I've had in the past, particularly it goes back to 2009 and shows the average tax bill. The high to low ranking is determined by the Department of Revenue. You can see last year for fiscal 19, we went from 66th to 70th with roughly just over $7,000 average bill. This year it's projected to go to 7284, or roughly a 4% for average single family. The average single-family value increase was roughly 4.5%. The commercial industrial 2 1/3%. You can see the value shifts a little bit from commercial to residential. All the data that's utilized here, commercial industrial, was all pulled from calendar 18 sales analysis. That is to say, for the commercial it was mostly 17 and 18. Residential, it was primarily calendar 18.
So Frank, the 70 means that we are number 70?
That's correct.
So there's 69 that are higher
That's
rates
correct.
than us? Thank you.
This next graph was something I saw in the Department of Revenue a year ago. It showed the last 3 years, and it's basically average single-family tax bill as a percentage of the assessed value. I incorporated and built in a few more years to it. You can kind of see the trend there as it's going from fiscal 14 to fiscal 20. And this is limited to just the single-family property.
And this is statewide or Chelmsford?
This is just Chelmsford. Yep. The next one is commercial industrial. Same thing, average CIP tax bill against the average assessed value. Again, going from 2014 to 2020. This next slide is also I've had in the past, but I added a column for each of the communities. You can see there are 11, 12 communities that are identified here that go back to fiscal 2000 through 2019, the available data. The column I added was the percent change, the average tax bill percent change for each year, and then at the bottom I showed the average since 2001. Chelmsford at 3.9, Tewksbury at 5.2, and so on.
Frank, I hate to jump back just one slide,
That's
but
fine.
with your assessed values on the previous slide where it went in 18 from 1.8 to 19 at 2.2, was that a change in the way they valued, or was that
Which slide do you want? I'm sorry, Ken?
just the slide that's up there right now? That jump that we see in 18 to 19, is that a change in the way we valued residents, or is that housing prices were strong, or?
Yes,
Is that,
housing, yep.
That's solely housing prices?
That's right.
We didn't change anything?
That's
in the-
commercial.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's because of the split rate.
That's because
That's
of
because
the
of
Split
the
rate, excuse
Got
me,
it, got it,
yes.
got it.
I was looking at the residential myself. Yes, that's the split rate, and then the 20 is projected, holding everything constant.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's fine. Slide 9, like I said, the one column I added was the percent change on an annual basis for all of the communities identified. This next slide, slide 10, is, I think I incorporated for the first time last year at former select person Glenn Diggs's recommendation. And what he had me do was take Chelmsford, take the contiguous, the abutting communities, and then the circles outside of that, and just list all of the information, the CIP value, the residential, shifts if there were any, in the rankings. So this is just an updated version of the same slide that I provided last year. These are all 2019, since that's all the available data. Many communities are having the classification tonight, actually, or in 2 weeks. Next paragraph is also one I've had in the past. The only thing I did different was add another one showing the actual split from last year, and you kind of see the shift as you pull away, as you go from a single tax rate, moving all the way up to 150. Next slide shows all available, the residential factor, all shift 1 through 150 in the available data for it in terms of, I have a couple of residential values, including the average assessed value, so it goes from 200,000, kind of recognizing condominiums, 300,000, and then the 447.6, which again is the average assessed. And it shows what the val difference, both in a percentage and a dollar amount, for the various shifts moving forward. In the 1.3 is the average CNI value. It shows once again the impact of any shift or to be left alone. In the far right column is once again the residential factor. Residential exemptions. It is not an often used exemption. There are, I think, 17. I have later on in the presentation how many we have altogether in the Commonwealth, but allows for a shift within the residential class for lower valued properties to higher valued properties and for non-owner occupied. It is for the most part limited to for the summer homes, residential properties that are not occupied by its owner, and for communities that have a large rental inventory. Adapting the residential exemption increases the residential tax rate. The higher rate creates a shift within the residential class. The CIP are unaffected by this particular exemption. The exemption cannot exceed 35% of the average assessed value of all Class 1 parcels. For this year, that was $438,300, which is different, of course, than the $447,600 for the single-family home. The $438,300 once again reflects the average assessed value for all residential properties. May be applied to the residential parcel of the owner's principal place of residence as of January 1. You may be granted in addition to any other exemptions. What the referencing here is personal or statutory exemption that would be in addition to that. This shows what the impact of such an exemption. Kind of, once again, the break-even point is the $438,000. This shows the taxes as a single rate as well as split rate. There are 16 communities. Most of the communities are, once again, substantial rental inventory or seasonal communities. They would include Somerset, Nantucket, Somerville, Cambridge, Brookline, I know has it. Small commercial exemption. Adopting the small commercial shifts the burden by the adopted percentage up to 10% from the eligible commercial parcels to non-eligible commercial parcels, as well as all industrial. So it's really a shift within the commercial and industrial, sending that tax burden to non-eligible and all industrial parcels. The value of the property cannot exceed $1 million, and employees have to be full-time employees, 10 or fewer. The Director of Business and Department of Unemployment Assistance sends us a list annually of all businesses that have 10 or fewer full-time employees. So that's sort of our basis. That's where we begin our analysis to who complies. That's certainly what we did last year. And then once we implemented it, we got a number of applications filing saying, I wasn't on the list, but I have 10 or fewer employees. And then maybe a dozen of those that eventually got the exemption.
So how many or what percentage of our businesses qualify for this?
Last year, we had 169 people that qualified.
And did they all apply?
No. So 169 were what let me rephrase it. We had 169 that when we sent out the bills, reflected the 10% small commercial exemption. Then we had maybe 10.
You automatically put it in?
That's correct,
okay.
Yeah, based on the information provided to us. Then subsequent to that, we had 10 or 12 applications, most of which were successful. So they got the exemption by way of an abatement or an application process.
So you don't know how many people would have qualified that didn't apply because you went through and already did the ones you knew of.
That's right. That's right. And did our due diligence to try and discover any others that we could find. We included some that kind of institutional knowledge that we know probably would qualify. Small condominium, office condos, that sort of thing. It's worth noting that the owner of the parcel receives the exemption, not necessarily the eligible businesses that actually affect the exemption. This shows that same exemption. It is reflective of, once again, a 127 split and the 10% small commercial. You can see that basically it's a shift within the class. It's simply revenue is not affected by this. The amount that we raise through property taxes in any of these shifts is unaffected. It's the value of the exemption is subtracted when calculating the tax rate, so which has the effect of driving the tax rate up. The amount is then deducted from each of the qualifying parcels times the tax rate, and they realize the savings, and it's effectively passed on to the non-qualifying. That concludes my presentation. I know it's a lot of data.
So some of the data earlier in the presentation, you've got spreadsheets that are looking historically backwards, so like from 2009 to 2020. Have you looked at extrapolation going forward?
I haven't.
You know, if things remain constant, for example, or sensitivity, if it goes up or down by
Yeah,
a
I
certain
could certainly
amount,
build that in for
what
a
are
few
the
years.
residents and the businesses going to see incrementally from where we are today?
Certainly, you're right, and some assumptions would have to be made, and then at some place in the spreadsheet would have to be a sensitivity analysis allowing for, if I'm wrong about some of my assumptions, the impact about some of those things. But we look, I suppose some of them could build in 3 to 5 year look forward.
What would you do if you assume there's a recession in 2 years?
That's just it.
You know,
I suppose if I look out far enough, in a normal real estate cycle of 7 to 10 years, you build in a slight turn down in the real estate market, I suppose wouldn't be inappropriate.
I think I'd be curious to see that.
But there were a lot. My hesitation would be all the assumptions that would be required. I mean, it would have to be understood that it's some assumptions, some guesswork.
I guess, Ken, the reason I asked is, would that affect like a forward-looking approach to where we want to go with tax strategy?
I agree.
I'm thinking rather than always looking in the rearview mirror.
Right. But I'm thinking from a stress standpoint, stress test it to say, okay, what if there is a recession with a 5% real estate downturn, or a 7 or a 10 in the next 2 years? What does that do to the revenues?
Well, it doesn't, because
it doesn't change the revenues.
Yeah, Proposition 2.5 is constant, so your guidepost
your levy keeps going up.
2.5% is your guidepost going forward until
but I guess I'm
the
curious,
state changes the law.
Right. What it would do to the tax rates?
Right, but the rates don't mean anything. What people care about is what's their bill.
I understand.
And unless you can forecast a change in commercial versus residential, and within residential, the changes in the market going forward, well, if that's the case, then we should be working on Wall Street, not in Billerica Road.
Should be investing.
Yeah, and so the best thing we can do is we've got the guideposts. So the past is sort of, is an indicator of future results, because the 2.5 remains constant since 1978. And then
Paul brings up a good point about the residential part, and Sam had done some analysis a couple of years ago. I don't think I incorporated it to this, but he took the residential and broke it out by style, all the different styles that are of homes, and all the different types, all the different use codes, and charted the changes that I had as a result of the market. And there were, to Paul's kind of point, all over the place. And even within just single-family homes, we have however many, 8 or 10 different styles. Ranches might appreciate it differently. I think we kind of talked about this a little bit last year, Emily. Even within the different styles of homes, there's a fair amount of fairly substantial difference sometimes between one style and another style. So sometimes lumping it all to single family is a little bit on the misleading side as well.
We also saw a period where condo values fluctuated significantly as well,
right.
And that market has now come back.
And we have a large condo complex. We have 2,600 condominiums here in town. That's a fairly substantial amount on a percentage basis.
Any other questions? This is a public hearing. Are we taking input?
We have to.
So it's a public hearing. If anybody would like to address the board.
Hi, John Demers, a resident in town for 33 years, Starlight Ave. Also, I work for an employer here in town for the last 12 years. They've been in town for the last 40 years. It's Waddington, North America. And just wanted to give you some idea as to what's happening with the tax rates. In 2018, we had our town taxes, and we had what we call an EMAC tax provided by the state, unfortunately. Our expenses that year were $372,000. In 2019, we now have the town taxes, minimum wage increase, EMAC again, and now the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. Our costs have now gone up to $753,000. And in 2020, the projections are, if the tax rate stayed the same, minimum wage increase, EMAC again, and Paid Family Medical Leave Act, our expenditures would be $729,000. The taxes that have changed since 2018 till now, moving forward, is roughly about $80,000 that has increased the company. And we're looking to say, what can we do to change it and bring it back down to where it was? Because we're not the only company that has all these other impacts. It's anybody who has a business in town that has a certain amount of people now getting additional costs sent to them by the state to subsidize other means. And the Paid Family Medical Leave Act, EMAC, is a subsidy for folks that can't afford health care. It's all back to the company, and they have to bear the burden of paying for those folks who cannot afford health care. So I ask you to take consideration of bringing back the taxes and reducing them maybe 5 to 7%. To my organization, it sounds like $5,000 to $10,000, but it makes a big difference. If you multiply it through all the organizations that are here in town and the businesses, I think it would help them out, and hopefully that we can fill up some of the buildings that are on Route 129 that are totally empty now.
What are the gross revenues of the company?
Excuse me?
What are your annual revenues?
I can't divulge that. It's a private company.
Okay.
So costs
And-
are kind of irrelevant without a gross revenue, right?
That's why I asked. And how was any of this offset by the federal income tax breaks that were given to corporations last year?
I have no idea. I'm just looking at the taxes in the town and what we have done and what we keep getting thrown at by the state and by the town regarding additional bills to pay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Kirk Marshall. I am a business owner in town as well, but I'm here to speak on behalf of the Chelmsford Swim and Tennis Club. We are a corporation, and because of the shift in tax classification, it caused our taxes to go up from $23,000 a year to $30,000 a year. Like John mentioned, since we have employees, our costs have gone up because minimum wage has gone up. The EMAC has gone up, and although we're not affected right now, but the Massachusetts paid family leave will also affect us as well. This year at our annual meeting in October, for the first time in 3 years, we had to raise our membership dues to cover the increase in taxes and also to meet minimum wage. We also set forth a plan for next year and the following year to raise our dues as well, because minimum wage continues to increase in Massachusetts until it reaches $15 an hour. So I just ask the board, when they do consider weighing residential and commercial, that they think about the families at Chelmsford Swim and Tennis Club and maybe give a break of 5-10% on the commercial side. Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
I'm Helen Blasioli, and I live on Augusta Way. And I said I wasn't going to stand up here and say anything, but I listened to these gentlemen, and I'd like to speak for the seniors who are on a fixed income and cannot come up with the money. If you turn around and take it away from the swim club or any other business that won't divulge their income. I can give you mine in 2 minutes, and I can also tell you everything else that went up in my life. And so I'm just saying, think about the seniors. Would you have more seniors than you have? I think you, don't we have more seniors in businesses?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, without a doubt, we have more seniors than businesses. Let's think about us for a change. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none.
Yeah, she's not coming.
Wait.
Oh,
Donald Van Dyne. I am not speaking on behalf of Economic Development Commission this evening because we do not have a scheduled meeting until Wednesday of this week. I would hope that the board would give us a consideration, give us an opportunity to weigh in on the matter after we have our discussion on Wednesday at your December 2nd meeting. So please keep your public hearing open. Thank you.
That was going to be my motion, to continue this public hearing for tax classification to December 2nd.
I'm okay with that.
I need a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Was that everybody?
Yep, that was a
Okay.
5-0.
Half an hour.
All right, see everybody next month on that one. Item number 9, vacate the foreclosure at 71 Princeton Street. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm here tonight to speak to you about asking your consideration to vacate a foreclosure judgment for the condo property located at 71 Princeton Street, Unit 115. I provided the board with a memo with all the background information and some of the steps that we took over the years to try to collect the taxes on this property. I'm pleased to report that on November 4th, my office received full payment of all taxes outstanding on this property, as well as the first half of fiscal year 20. So in consideration of full payment to the town, all fees and interest, I would ask that the board consider voting the motion that you have before you. And also, I can answer any questions. I also have a signature sheet that I would just ask that if it is approved, that you sign that for me. Thank you.
Any comments, questions?
I don't have any.
I'll make a motion to vacate the final judgment covering the tax taking made against Carl Christiniak for unpaid taxes covering the property at 71 Princeton Street, Unit 115, North Chelmsford, upon payment of all taxes, interest, and charges due as provided by Mass General Law 6069.
A second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And congratulations, John, on the review by Powers and Sullivan. Good job.
Oh, thank you. I want to give credit. I just want to say, as I'm here, it's great to have a colleague like Darlene to work with, as well as I want to give credit to my staff. I have folks down there that are very focused on accuracy, and they take their job seriously, so I want to thank them for their hard work. Thank you.
On behalf of the board, say thank you to all of them.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. All right, Paul, town managers reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief this evening. Just got 2 items for your consideration this evening. The first one sort of is a follow-up from an item at last meeting. Last meeting, you had the presentation from Criterion Associates regarding the analysis of fire station location alternatives in the town of Chelmsford. What I have for you this evening is sort of a perhaps next step going forward in terms of how a committee would be formed, their charge, how a committee may be constituted, the items that they would examine, and how they would conduct their meetings. Again, I don't see this taking place till after the holidays at this point, since we're on the doorstep of Thanksgiving. So, I just wanted to bring it to your attention and ask you to consider it in the weeks ahead, and perhaps we can have a discussion next month. So that's the first item I have. And then the second item I have is again, a follow-up from the last meeting. There was a question regarding Roberts Field, ball fields accessibility. I did confirm with Steve Yonley, who's the Assistant Public Works Director, that the master plan for Roberts Field identified the walking, running perimeter circuit to be an ADA compliant area, and they were now working on the survey plan information, and it's the intent to make that walkway ADA, fully ADA compliant. That would provide access to the reconstructed fields, additional playground access, and actually close proximity to the pond as well from the parking lot. So again, that work will take place over the winter, and again, the goal is to begin construction in the spring, summertime, so that those fields can be usable the following season. So I
Thank you.
did have a follow-up on that.
Thank
So
you.
those are my two matters for this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So you want to talk about this next time? Is that what
I
you're
think so. I
saying?
mean, there's a lot in there. We do have an executive session this evening, that sort of pertains to this. So I think I'd rather, sort of just go to that before we come back to this, because again, where we are in the season, the real way to get something like this off the ground would be after the holidays.
Okay. Meeting minutes?
Make a motion that we accept the regular meeting minutes for August 19th, 2019 as presented.
Second?
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The second set of minutes that we have in our packet, I know I've made some updates to it. Vivian, did you not get the changes I sent? They're not included.
I had asked for my name to be corrected too, and they're not, it's not in this one.
Document that she got.
No.
It's not what was posted.
Okay, all right, well, I know, I thought that's what I sent.
Well, there's like a lot of names that are spelled that were corrected.
Just to prove it next time.
I updated it, and I
Yep.
thought that's what she got.
Put it off to the next meeting now?
Yep, next meeting's fine.
All right, so our liaison reports and referrals.
Want me to
Virginia?
start?
Sure.
The Capital Planning Committee will continue their meetings on November 21st and December 5th, with December 12th as a backup day if needed because of weather issues. The school committee would like to remind folks that they are going to have their second public forum to provide inputs to their strategic plan update on December 10th, and the location will be announced. And the Vinyl Square Committee wants to make everyone aware that the Decorating Committee is hosting the North Chelmsford Common Tree Lighting on December 7th from 4 to 5:30 p.m. And they will have hot chocolate, candy canes, pizza, carols, music, and a visit from Santa.
George?
All set.
Emily?
Stormwater drains are continuing to be maintained. The Chelmsford DPW Facebook page has frequent votes and little contests for stormwater stuff. There's also some really great information on how to create a rain garden if you have been hearing about these and are interested in creating one around your property. There are some tips and there are some pieces of advice, and it's an interesting proposition. So,
Just a couple of things. Last week, the Greater Lowell Chamber of Commerce awarded their Community of Champions Awards. They select one person from each of their member communities to give this award to. It was given last week to Kathy Buff for all her work with Budget Buddies, and plus being a 30-year member of the town meeting member and other activities that she has done around town. So congratulations to Kathy. And on a sad note, we just found out today that former Senator Susan Fargo passed away last week. She was a huge champion of the Senior Circuit Breaker program, which helps seniors. I know it's a timely topic for today when we're talking about real estate taxes, and she was a huge proponent of that and made sure all the communities that she represented were aware of it. So sad to hear about Senator Fargo.
And with that, I'll just make one note. I did the Thanksgiving walk last year. It was fantastic, and I know we saw some of the other selectmen and the town manager out there. If you have time on that Wednesday, it's a great way to slow down right before the holiday and just take a break and get out in the woods and enjoy. It was a lot of fun. And with that, I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And that's
Press?
it. Nope. Any press questions?
No press.
I'll
I don't
make
know why
a,
you make me do that, and there's nobody in the room. But
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, no, to the executive.
Executive session.
Okay, you're right. I'll make a motion that we adjourn to executive session for the purpose of strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the firefighters union, not to return to open session.
Second.
and do we have a poll on that?
Aye.
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 Adjourn.
Okay.